Really bright out here. I'm just west of Farson, Wyoming, on my way back home from being in Montana up in Billings for the week, and I drove through here on Monday and saw this herd of wild horses and got some photographs of them in the fog, and now it's just bright and sunny as can be, and the herd is hanging right here on the side of the road. It's about the only place for them to get any feed is here on the side of the road where the sun has melted the snow away from the edge, where they can get some grass and stuff. But there's also a little foal with them, a little newborn. Looks like it's only maybe a week old, if that. So let me show you this. So there's the herd stallion right there. He's a big horse. And then here's the rest of the herd, as you can see, just right alongside the road. Looks like maybe one or two of those mares might have a foal in them, that they might give birth here. That little colt that's laying over there that's pretty early to be born here. It's mid-March. You can see the mare, the little colt laying there at her feet. This other truck stopped right there and made her a little bit nervous. Wild horses are an icon of the West. They're technically, no, they're not wild. They're feral. All these horses came from just stock horses that got loose, horses that were broken, were trained at one point and got loose, or people turned loose for whatever reason. And there's little bands of them throughout Colorado, Utah, Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, Nevada. There's a lot of controversy about horses. The biggest thing is that they're not technically the native horses, though I have my own personal theories about that. I think that there were horses here when the Spaniards first started releasing their horses, Mustangs. I think that the Nez Perce specifically already had horses. There's evidence, the fact the Appaloosa, it's an American breed of horse, that's well known. But the fact that when Lewis and Clark were rescued and helped, basically saved by the Nez Perce, the Nez Perce at that time had thousands of horses and had the Appaloosa breed already. Now, how were they supposed to have done that, genetically bred Appaloosas from Mustang stock, when you can't? I mean, you can't take the original Spanish Mustangs and get Appaloosas from them, most likely. But even more than that, the fact that in a short 175, 200 years, these horses that were released from, Santa Fe, New Mexico, Ponce de Leon released horses in Florida, whatever, horses that were released down in the South and the Southwest, within a few hundred years, the Nez Perce specifically had huge bands of horses and had specifically bred a horse with very specific color patterns. And Appaloosas are different than other horses. They actually have different feet. My dad was a professional farrier. He shoed horses for his whole life until he was old and retired, and he knew a lot about horses and a lot about horse hoofs. And he told me, he's like, the Appaloosas have different feet than normal horses. Something else you'll see, and I don't see any curlies in this herd, is the curly stock, where you'll see horses that have really curly fur in the wintertime. It's a controversial subject also about where the horses got where the curlies came from. But if you look up, just check it out on Wikipedia, it will tell you that the first curlies were found out by Ely, Nevada, or I think it was Eureka, Nevada, which is north of Ely. It's a genetic trait that was first found there, And Wikipedia talks about this, that some cowboys rounded up some of the curlies and started breeding them. But one winter, there was a really, really harsh winter, and all the wild horses that were out there on the range died, except for the curlies. The curlies have really strong genetic, traits to survive harsh winters. My dad told me that there was a herd of curlies out past Tooele, Utah, out there in the West Desert for a long time. When he was a kid growing up, there was this herd of curlies out there. Eventually, people rounded them up and interbred them with their regular, with their quarter horses and the Mustangs and stuff. My point is that I believe that those original curlies that were found there in outside of Eureka, Nevada, and out in Tooele, Utah, and places like that, were literally Ice Age era horses that were still around. I know scientists tell me I'm full of crap. People tell me I'm full of it. I've got lots of evidence to back this up. The fact that curly coat like that was found, and then you'll see it now in some of the horses here, specifically in Wyoming, because some guys that had bred some curlies let some horses go over by Cheyenne, I think it was, and that curly gene is still popping up in some of the horses on that side of Wyoming. But there's so much evidence in my book that the horses were here. They were different. They were a different type of horse. They were smaller. All right, let me tell you a quick story here about Chief Walker, who was a Ute leader. He wasn't necessarily a chief in that sense. He was a well-known guy who did a lot of slave trading and had a lot of horses here in Utah. I was at the Fish Lake camping. This is years and years ago, like 25 years ago. And the Fish Lake archaeologist gave a presentation, which I sat in and listened to. And he told this about how Chief Walker was buried when he died. Chief Walker was taken back up into the mountains. They dug a big pit, and they laid Chief Walker down in this pit. They lined the pit with logs, cut logs. And then they laid all his possessions in there with him, his prized possessions. They took a slave boy and set him in there, crying and wailing, and then they covered this pit up with logs, with the boy still in there alive and wailing to scare away the evil spirits. And then they took a bunch of horses and slit the horses' throats and killed them and laid them all around the tomb and then buried all that up. When he told this, I thought, this is crazy, because I had just read an article in the National Geographic about the horse cultures of Eurasia, specifically the steppes of Russia. I'm talking ancient, like 2,000 years ago or more, and how they would practice that exact same burial, virtually this exact same burial custom. So when he got done with his presentation, I went over and got talking to him and asked him if he was aware that the horse cultures in Eurasia and that had practiced very similar customs of burial. He had no clue. He had no idea. I found this with a lot of scientists, is that they specialize in very specific things. Like his specialty was the Native American cultures of the American Southwest. He didn't know anything else about what was going on around the rest of the world. I said to him, how do you think a horse culture here in the American Rocky Mountain West that had only been around for a couple hundred years had developed such a distinct burial custom and culture that was identical to a culture on the other side of the planet that was revolved around horses? He's like, I don't know. And I said, I'll tell you how. They had horses the whole time. The peoples here in America, in North America proper, had horses, most of them. But the Plains Indians, the Rocky Mountains Indians, even a bunch of them of the Southwest had horses previous to the white man coming along and bringing their horses. Some of them, like the Nez Perce, like I said, had a lot of horses. They had horses forever, and they talk about this in their own stories, in their own winter counts. The Sioux Indians, the Lakota Indians, the Sioux out of the the Dakotas, they have winter counts where they have these old hides that they've written their stories on, and they've passed these down from generations and generations. And they talk about having horses long before Columbus came. They count their genealogies back 1,000 years, and they talk about having horses. Anyway, it's just one of these things that I find very intriguing anyway. But wild horses of the West, they're fun to photograph. A lot of people come out here. There's 2 cars stopped right now photographing them. It's kind of like Yellowstone. Somebody pulls over and everybody else has to stop. But when horses are this right on the side of the road like this, they're easy to photograph. So let me show you some more of these. So here's that big old stallion again. I'm blowing out these highlights because it's so bright. So I'm purposely blowing out the highlights so you can see the detail in him. Stallions tend to hang back like that. They kind of watch the perimeter. There's the rest of the herd. I pulled up right alongside, just on the other side of the road, like a truck that just turned around did, and photographed them right from the window. It's a good, safe way to do it because you're not in, they're used to cars. When you step out of your vehicle, all of a sudden you become a human and they start to get a little wary of you. So I drove further back here to where I don't know, the stallion's the closest to me, and he's 100 yards away. He's still right over here. You can see him there. You want to keep a safe distance from any animal you're photographing, and even though these are literally just feral horses, they're wild, and they can easily stomp you into the ground if they want. And they'll get territorial, and especially when they've got a young one like that little colt down there. The mares can get pretty pissy around you, so you just got to be careful when you stop to photograph something. It's best to stay in your car. It's so bright I can't really get a good color look at what he is. I think he's just pretty black. That's what he looks like. He's got a white spot. He's got a white face. Yeah, white stripe right on his face. Does he have white socks? Looks like he's got. Yeah. Yep. At least the 2 back feet are white socks. So shooting from inside my car here, they're not afraid of me. If I was to get out and stand right here, they'd get really nervous. There's another really nice paint back there. I like that shot. I'm gonna try to get that before he moves too much. So sitting back here in my car just on the other side of the road from him, you can see him right there over my shoulder. If you're into horses and photographing wild horses, there's some good places like in Utah. You can go out in the West Desert out by Dugway Proving Grounds to find some. That's a really popular place to go. I like to go down to Arizona when I can. There's some herds down there on the Salt River up in the Superstition Mountains, and that's where I've got a lot of my stuff that I really like. I like the scenery down there. That's part of the reason I like going there. I don't like just shots of horses. I like shots with some scenery around them. Saguaro cactuses, they hang along the river there, so you can get them in the water, those kind of things. Out here in a place like this, this is just desert, it's high desert, very low growing sagebrush that's been really chewed down a lot. They're mostly feeding on the grass in the area, but just whatever they can paw up and try to get. They can be really fun to photograph, and I've seen some great work that people have done. Here's one that I did down in Arizona of a big stallion running. I wanted to get this shot, but I didn't think it was going to happen, and then somebody rode their horses upriver and got him all mad, and he started running back and forth, and I got this shot. So this is one of my favorites. I used to slow shutter speed on this, 1/20th of a second, and then motion blurred it on purposely slow shutter speed and panned along with them to get that wonderful motion blur. I call it the Ghost Stallion. I prefer doing a lot more artsy things like that when I'm shooting horses. Wildlife I typically don't, but horses are something. Another car. Horses are something I really prefer to get more artistic stuff with. The funny thing is it doesn't sell. I mean, people like it, but just doesn't seem to sell as well as just the straight on standard old shots of horses. People want to buy those and hang on their walls. Go figure. I'm gonna shoot some more of this little guy. He's done feeding and he's looking around. So when you're photographing in a lot of bright like this, a lot of snow and bright, your best bet is to overexpose by about 2 full stops. Otherwise, the darkness of the animals, the horses in this case, are just going to be totally gone. Here's that little colt there. Look at that, it's just such a cutie. And if I change the exposure to where my histogram looks good, let me show you. Look at that, as I bring my exposure down to try to get the histogram decent, it's really dark. You can't see anything but silhouette of the horse. So you want to overexpose stuff. If I bring it back up and overexpose it by, about 2 stops right there, it makes it a lot easier to see the detail on the animals, especially if they're darker animals like that, darker horses. You're going to lose the highlights. That's totally acceptable. Just, it is what it is. Gonna lay down. There's the mama right there. So thanks for joining me on this little adventure of stopping on the side of the road and photographing some wild horses. I was hoping they'd be right here. This is right in the same general spot where I saw them on Monday and photographed them in the fog. So I figured they'd be here and was watching for them, but you couldn't miss them. I mean, they're literally standing on the side of the road. So get out and explore. That's what I do. I'll take back roads. I'll just get out and explore and look around looking for things to photograph. That's the 3 rules of photography according to Rodney Lowe Jr., who is a photographer that I took a workshop from back in September. The 3 rules are explore, explore, and explore. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this little video on photographing wild horses, and happy trails to you until we meet again.